Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode of Research 101, where I share tips and advice for the research life. Today we're talking about some characteristics or some behavior patterns we find with bad PhD students, and if we find ourselves doing that, how can we actually avoid that so we become more effective, more dedicated, more efficient researchers in the lab, in the field, in the office, on planet Earth, on the cliff, wherever you may be. We want to be a better PhD student. So without further ado, let's just get into the first one, which is all about impatience. Now we know that all of us, no matter how experienced or how junior we are, we do uncover and encounter some sort of impatience when something in the lab has gone well, or you get rejected from a paper, or you can't get enough participants, and that is natural. We are allowed to have some sort of impatience. But when it becomes a characteristic of a bad PhD student, is when two things happen. When that impatience is chronic, every single scenario you see impatience, and two, when that emotion or that reaction to that impatience starts to affect other people around you. So, scenario where I saw during my PhD, and even now as a postdoc, I've seen people where they're a PhD student and they've had a bad day, and they're taking it out on the machines, they're taking it out on the resources around them. They've been very brash opening the door. They've been rash in terms of doing the experiments and being quite rude because they've been impatient because a result didn't work out or they had an issue with a supervisor, and that impatience then starts to affect others. The other thing is when that impatience starts to be from start to finish, day to day, week to week, and that is when things naturally don't go well. Many of us, you might be watching, your experiments don't go well, you have failure after failure. And when that impatience becomes a chronic negative feeling all the time, why is it not working? I've had enough. And then you get into this spiral of negativity. And that impatience becomes quite detrimental to you, to the relationship with the supervisors, to your relationship to those around you. And that's where we have to be very careful with how we deal with impatience. You might be either angry as a reaction, you might be, unfortunately really sad and negative, and then that prevents you from going to do your PhD because you've had enough. Your impatience has overtaken you. Your emotions have overtaken you. And that's something we have to be very wary of, is how we react and deal after the next few days of something that has caused us to be impatient. That might be waiting on orders, waiting on supervisor to email. And the thing is, all of us go through this. And what I want to remind, like I did at the start of the segment, is it is natural to be impatient, but it is not natural to consistently be impatient where you're now harming yourself and those around you. That's one thing we need to avoid. Number two is all about issues with authority. Now, a lot of the times, students can be, very argumentative in terms of talking back, thinking, I don't want to do this. Why should I do this? Why are you telling me to do this? Or saying, I'm not going to do this. And a lot of this reaction to somebody of a superior kind of position, or somebody that's their supervisor or their postdoc colleague has asked them to do something or told them potentially off for some sort of bad practice, and they start talking back because they have an issue with authority. When somebody's told them to behave within the rules, or in terms of safety, which is very important for those who work in the lab, or even if you're dealing with participants and certain etiquette, and a lot of people have said, no, why should I do that? I'm not going to do this. Why are you telling me to? Why don't you tell that person, this person? And that's a very, very bad telltale sign of arguments to come or friction to come if somebody has an issue with authority. Even though I am a postdoc, I have my superior, I have my boss, and he has a professor who's his boss, and then a head. There's always somebody ahead of you, or in terms of on top of you, in terms of seniority or position. And this issue with authority can be very dangerous long term. And even if you're a boss to a company, a multi-billion-dollar company, you have shareholders that you have to be accountable to. If you're head of a research group in a lab, you have the head of the school you're accountable to. So having issues with authority during a PhD stand, if not addressed, can have very difficult professional relationships with those around you going on into your PhD and actually afterwards. You notice I use my hands a lot. I'll try not to, but I'm expressive in my hands, I guess. But what I mean is that we don't want to fall prey to this kind of difficulty with listening to those above us, whether it's constructive criticism, whether it's something that's maybe slightly harsh but fair. Somebody's told you to do something that you should be doing. We have to sometimes, what we say, take our medicine, swallow that bitter pill and said, I understand. I appreciate that. And there are times where somebody says something foul, but there's also a different way to deal with it, not being aggressive, argumentative. And unfortunately, I have seen this as well, where because I'm quite young as a supervisor, I've seen a lot of people who may not want to, may react with me very different to how they would react with somebody who's slightly older. And this is sometimes people have an issue with talking with from people of authority, especially when they're maybe the same age or only slightly older, because there's some sort of ego or arrogance or pride, and that's something that's not healthy. I've seen people who are professors at my age. So who am I to say something? So we want to acknowledge that there are times where it's bitter, it's uncomfortable, it's not nice, but we know that we have to respect, and this is a key part of this segment, we have to respect our elders, we have to respect those in senior position to us. And by doing that is being polite and kind, even when there are some sort of frictions. So bear that in mind. Number three is the person who thinks they know everything. This notion of, do you know what, I'm not going to listen to the supervisor. It works this way because of this, right? And I've done it in the lab, they haven't. What do they know about this? What do they know about that? Every time they keep telling me to do this and haven't even seen what's going on. And that can spiral into this notion of, I know everything. Let me sort it out. Let me deal with it. And just because the supervisor or professor or whoever it may be may not be in the lab or they haven't done that research for a while, doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. There's a reason why they've got to that position. And for many people, it's quite remarkable how much they know, but they don't share until it's the right time. So I saw this and I fell prey to this notion of thinking I know better than the supervisor, and I was guilty of it because when it went wrong, I had that embarrassing moment of going back to the supervisor and say, you know what, yeah, you were right. And this was to do with cell culture, where I was doing repeats of an experiment, and I thought I knew better. So if I did it all together, then I would have got data a lot quicker, and it would have meant saving time, which is very important. Turns out the supervisor was right because that didn't count as a separate experiment. That counted as a repeat because of the way I did it. And then I looked like an idiot. And I've seen a lot of these cases further on in the years I've been in research where we as PhD students, we won't know anything, we won't know everything, and even when you have our Viva, we still won't know everything. Because the very classical statement is the more you do research, the more you realise you don't know. And if you ask professors, they'll tell you, yeah, we don't know. They know a lot about that area, they know a lot more than you, they will advise you not to do things, they've done that experiment maybe years before you did, but they'll look at the bigger scheme that, yeah, we still don't know much about this field. But that doesn't mean they don't know a lot. You see what I mean? There's a slight difference. So unfortunately, we don't want to fall prey to this behavior of I think I know everything, because you don't. I can tell you now with full confidence you don't. And that might be hard to swallow. It might be me saying I know all. I don't. But what I'm telling you is that none of us know it all. That's why we're doing a PhD. That's why we do research. So be careful not to have this behavior traits of thinking you know better, thinking you know better than the postdoc, thinking no, I'll sort it out. And because of that no-hold mentality, and the last thing I mentioned on this segment is we then find it very difficult to ask for help because we think we know all. And when we have mistakes or things don't go well, we try to overcompensate as opposed to actually seeking out help. And that's unfortunately quite difficult. And same with the impatience, the first part of this video, where because we're impatient, sometimes we don't seek help because we're impatient, we want to do it again, we want to do it quicker, we want to do it faster, and that becomes a problem. So there's a theme of, a lot of these bad behavior traits make it difficult for a person to seek actual help, whether it's mental help, whether it's help with the lab, help with the research. It makes it a lot more difficult. Number four is a very obvious one, but very important to share, is that lack of organization. A sign of a bad PhD student is where papers are everywhere, data is in this folder and that folder, some data is missing, presentations are half-hearted, may not turn up to meetings, may not turn up to research on time, things have been delayed, you can't find the data when you need to, and that becomes a serious issue because as you go further, as you progress in your PhD, that need for organization will save you a lot of time going forward. And if you're spending weeks trying to find something or repeat something because you didn't label it, and I mentioned many Instagram posts, for those who might not have an Instagram page about research, I talk a lot about this because it makes life a lot easier and makes you a more effective researcher if, and only if, you start to organize where you store your data, how you write things, how you capture information, how you organize your papers, how you start to formulate your presentations, how to structure reports, your thesis. All of these require a level of organization. And even how you organize your data with collaborations, how you organize data to send to your supervisor. All of this makes it a lot more streamlined, so you can focus more on collecting data, analyzing it, discussing it, as opposed to repeating things, as opposed to actually spending weeks trying to find things. And that's something we don't want to do. Now, last but not least, number 5 is all about, unfortunately, a person blaming other people or other things. Now, there are times when it's actually somebody else's fault or it's because of something. But keep going back to it as an excuse, as a way to vent, as a way to let out, as an excuse not to do research becomes a very dangerous problem where a lot of the time there's a lot of moaning about my supervisor's not there or this person's not there or there's a delay on the research, there's problems within the lab, within the research group. There's also a lot of these excuses and then it starts to initiate a foundation of the blame game. Now this is one, not healthy. Two, we are all accountable to our own research, our own PhDs to a point, and there are times where other people do become an issue, do become a problem. But blaming them is not actually going to solve anything. Seeking advice, seeking help, going through the proper channels to address a query, that's effective. Yes, we are human nature. We sometimes want to moan, and I've seen it. I did it, unfortunately. I put my hands up. I did it. I slagged off my supervisor, said, why they're not there, why they're not doing this, and many people do so. But continuing that notion when you then become unproductive in the day because of it, or you take days off because you've had enough, you want to blame this, or you're fed up, that's not healthy, it's not professional, it's not mature, it's not very wise. Now, although it's human nature to have that notion, as I mentioned, having it at a chronic phase, having it so much so then you use it as an excuse, very knowingly, even though you don't tell other people, you use it as an excuse to do, I'm not doing it right, I had enough of this person or that person. What's the point of me doing this? What's the point of this? This university is useless from this or that. This blaming game is not helpful and it's not going to get you to your PhD any quicker. Although it might feel natural, it has to stop. We must focus on actual solutions. Right. Yes, that was outside my control, but what can I do? Yes, I wasn't happy with this person. How can I prevent it from happening again? How can I address this to stop this? These are effective solutions, effective thought processes we need to do in order to get around something that has hindered us or has affected us or has stopped us. Let's look at solutions to avoid it and go through the proper channels if it's to do with somebody or if it's to do with something, like we do with any experiment, figure out what went wrong, how can we stop it from happening again. Now, if something's happened in the past, we can't change it. Right? We put hands up, we look at it, you can write it all down, we can't change it. So we have to focus on maybe preventing it from happening again and how to be more effective if that scenario comes around again. And this is how we should think. It's not easy. I'm not saying that we should just turn around like that, but something that we should work towards. And that's something that's very important, especially to minimize the notion of blaming others or blaming other things. So guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Hope you found it useful. If you did, please do leave a like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future uploads around research tips and advice. As you know, for those who've been tuning in with the channel, I'm trying to do more vlogs to give you kind of an insight as to my thinking around research, things that maybe not directly in terms of tips and advice, but things that I hope you actually found useful and even entertaining. So do subscribe if you can. So click it down below. That'll be very, very helpful. And I shall hopefully see you in the next one. I hope I do. So you can enjoy the lights, the camera, and the action. What do you think? Take care guys, I'll see you soon.